So last night, no particular reason, but I was looking at some archival videos of commemoration events taking place at Senghenef in South Wales in 2013. Now, these commemoration events were to mark the centenary of Britain's worst mining disaster and one of the world's worst mining disasters, occurred at Senghenef Colliery, or the Universal Colliery, I should say, in Senghenef in South Wales in 1913. This was a terrible catastrophe. About 440 men and boys were killed, um, and it does stand out as Britain's very worst. Um, but it only tops the list of many, many disasters in our coalfields. And I just thought it would be a bit of a different video to talk about this a little bit because a few years ago, because I'm interested in history, I've done research on British pit disasters. You can see here, I printed this out. This is a list of every disaster I could find. And in the coal mining industry in this country, a disaster was classed as any incident with five or more fatalities. They could be caused by a range of things: flooding, fire damp, enclosures. There was a range of things that could have caused this. Coal mining was dark, dangerous, dirty work. Um, and for generations, men and boys, and in the early years, girls as well. That became outlawed, I believe, in the mid 19th century. But generations, um, human beings went into the earth to extract this mineral. So it really, really was costly. And I don't think we should ever forget it. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the worst disasters in a minute, but I actually done some research on this. It's quite extensive, but I found it interesting, but also harrowing. I've done extensive research and a lot of resources. You can get things online from, for example, the Durham Mining Museum, and there's other local websites to particular coalfields. Across Britain, some of the most extensive coal mining was in the South Wales coalfields, um, in South Yorkshire, in Northumberland and County Durham, in central Scotland, um, Staffordshire. These are some of Lancashire. These are some of the better known coalfields, but there were others. Um, and it's just staggering when you look at the statistics. For example, in the Senghenef disaster, entire streets were wiped out. Um, I mean, you really can't underestimate the impact this had on mining communities. Um, Perhaps, if you grew up in the northeast of England, even though the industry had declined sort of before my time or around the time I was born, it really declined by the 1990s. Um, the impact even of old disasters is still felt, it's still remembered. So in the case of St. Geneth, there were people who were grandchildren of miners who had died. Um, but according to my study, I worked out that some 11,700 men and boys died in pit disasters. And that's just from the major disasters. Probably far more died in individual tragedies. There's many, many, many incidents where individual miners were killed. So the big disasters tend to get attention, but it's really quite sobering when you look at these statistics. To give an example, Sunderland alone, within the city boundaries of Sunderland, that is today's city boundaries, we had several collieries. One was a Wearmouth colliery. It was one of the deepest of its kind, and its shaft actually is located directly underneath what is now the Stadium of Light, which is one of Britain's biggest football stadiums. Um, but just to give some statistics, just for Sunderland, um, in July 1835, a fall of stone killed two victims, and they both had exactly the same name by coincidence, both called John Gray. 1837, fall down shaft, three boys killed. September 1862, a fall down shaft, 5 killed. May 1869, an explosion, 7 killed. February 1992. So the disasters were happening even quite recently. Although by that time safety had improved, but there were still sometimes, reminders of how dangerous this industry was. 2 killed in that incident. And individual fatalities between 1843 and 1992, 286 killed in that particular colliery. But it wasn't the only one in Sunderland. There was also Ripe Colliery, Hilton and Castletown Colliery, Silksworth Colliery, and it led to a total, from my research in Sunderland, of 778 men and boys killed, and that might not be extensive, that may be higher than that. But that's just in one city, 778. Um, if we look at, like I say, my total research, I've uncovered 11,000 deaths from pit disasters in this country, which is a truly staggering figure. But I mentioned St. that was the worst, but it's by no means the only one. So the worst in England, the St. disaster was the worst in the United Kingdom, but the worst specifically in England occurred in 1866 at the Oaks Colliery near Barnsley in South Yorkshire, when some 383 men and boys were killed. And there's a number of videos around that disaster as well. The Victoria Pit near West Houghton, which is now Greater Manchester, Len, Lancashire, 1910, some 344 men and boys killed. 1894, the Albion Colliery in Pontypridd, in Ronan on Taff. I hope I'm pronouncing the Welsh names correctly. 295 killed. The Prince of Wales Colliery, 1878, at Abercairn in Caerphilly, 270 killed. The Gresford Colliery, Wrexham in North Wales, 1934, 266 killed. And one of the worst local disasters here in the northeast occurred at the New Hartley Colliery, in Northumberland, 1862, 220 men and boys killed. Scotland's worst mining disaster took place at Blantyre Colliery in South Lanarkshire, 1877, 207 killed. Wood pits in Merseyside, 1878, 204 killed. Lundhill Colliery near Barnsley, South Yorkshire, 1857, 189 killed. And that's just the top 10. There are many, many other disasters with over 100 fatalities. Um, and these go way back, 1812, Felling Colliery, um, which is here in Tyne and Wear now, 92 killed. At that time, it would have been part of County Northumberland, actually. Um, Another bad local disaster we had, 1951, Easington Colliery in County Durham, 83 killed. I could go on, just disaster after disaster after disaster. And some coalfields did suffer particularly bad. Um, Most of these disasters tend to date from the late 19th and early 20th century, but I have uncovered disasters going right back to the 18th century. For example, the North Biddick pits in County Durham, 1743, 17 killed. Harrington Colliery, County Durham, 1794, 20 killed. For those really old disasters, there's very little information available. In the 19th century, they started recording the names of the deceased, very often brothers, fathers, cousins. So the impact this had, was profound, really was profound. Um, and sometimes individual collieries suffer more than one disaster. The Oaks Colliery in Barnes just suffered another disaster, 1847, 73 killed. Um, so anyway, you get the idea. Only the very worst disasters are fairly well remembered, like the St. disaster and the Oaks Colliery disaster and the Blantyre disaster in Scotland. But really, most of these disasters are forgotten by the wider public. They were remembered within those communities, but I think one reason for that is there was simply so many of them. But I think we should never ever forget the price of coal on this island. It was a lucrative industry, but it was also a very deadly and dangerous industry, and it is so today. I mean, of course, coal mining's largely gone from the UK today. But, even a few years ago, I remember 2011, I believe, was the last significant tragedy in British mines in Glyson. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Colliery in Wales, when four men died. Um, but, we're reminded of how dangerous this industry is around the world. China has had many serious pit disasters, particularly in North China. There's some extensive coal fields in Shanxi province um, and Jilin province. And in Turkey, a few years ago, the Soma mining disaster. And of course, Canada and the United States have had their share of mining disasters. All over the world, you can find examples. Of course, the Chilean miners, um, thankfully, that was a positive outcome. All of those men survived. But shortly after that, there was another disaster in Colombia, which sadly resulted in fatalities. So, it is a very dangerous industry, but we should remember it with things like coal mining and shipbuilding that built this country. That was the price of the Industrial Revolution. Um, if we look at, um, I was going to say if we lost my trail of thought, but I don't think we should ever forget it. You will find numerous references online. There's websites and so on. There is some archival footage, especially of 20th century disasters, sort of old British Pathé newsreels and so on. It's an interesting subject, but it is just a reminder of just how costly this industry was, and I think we should respect the sacrifice these men and boys went through. I mean, we remember our war dead, rightly so, but the impact that mining disasters had on some of these mining communities was equivalent, really, to wartime casualties. Um, we should never forget the price that they paid. Thanks for watching.